Our annual fleece auction begins July 27th, so it's coming very quickly. And one of the things we're doing as part of the auction is we're offering micron data in each listing for every fleece that we're offering in the auction. So I do get the question, how do I use micron data when I'm trying to select a fleece? So fortunately, we have a statistician in-house, my husband Rich, and he's going to help us understand how to read the micron data that's provided with each fleece to make your selection. All right, so the first question is, what is a micron and why is that important for hand spinners?
So a micron is a unit of measurement that's important in the fiber business, and it's universally used. And it's to determine the diameter of the fiber of the animal. So you'll send in a sample to Texas A&M. There will be 1,000 fibers in that sample. I don't even know how many there are. And it'll measure each one of them, but it'll take thousands of readings across the whole length of the fiber from top to bottom. And then it'll give you that in the report, and it'll show you a graph, how it looks from top to bottom. So you can kind of see what's happening along that fiber. Is it consistent? Is it all over the place? You can start to see the nutritional effect when you get into that by looking at that. In fact, that's the only way you can really see that on the report. So it's really a measure of fineness. In a perfect world, you would look at the micron, and the lowest number would be that would be the finest fiber, and that would be true. That would be the finest fiber. But when you take them collectively, that may not be correct because the next fiber might be much bigger.
Right.
So when you look at the whole sample, you average them.
And fineness, I mean, I'm thinking of two things. Number one is it's how soft it is. Like if you want to wear something next to your skin, you want something that's fine. And also, fineness relates to me as far as if I want to spin a lace weight yarn, I'm going to go with something that's very fine because the accumulation of more fibers as you're spinning it will make a smaller diameter if it's a finer versus a coarser wool,
Yeah,
right?
so if you want a finer gauge yarn, like lace weight, and I think Jamieson and Smith does their, what's it called, the super lace
fine,
weight?
Super lace weight, yeah.
They use their super fine wool in the lightest, finest yarn that they have. Not if you buy yarn from them, it's not all going to be lace quality, you know, to make a shawl out of. Only the finest stuff would be good for that. And that's what we're focused is on that side of the spectrum.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with, by the way, a medium or higher grade coarseness, but for some projects you wouldn't want that, and for some projects you wouldn't want the fine lace like we have.
So AFD, that's on the report. It's one of the columns when you're one of the data elements when you look at a micron report. And again, this is in the listing, each listing for a fleece. So when you see AFD, what does that mean?
Well, that's the average fiber diameter. So as I said at the beginning, you send in all your samples, and we take like a, I don't know, 2-inch section, right down to the skin is where we cut it. And they'll take the measurement from top to bottom on each fiber, and then it'll be several thousand measurements that they're putting together. And they'll average them all, and that's your AFD, the average of the fiber diameter for the entire sample.
Okay. All right, so you talked about this a little bit, but is a lower micron always better?
No. If you're trying to make a rug, for example, or in the hooking or whatever people do, you don't want a finer yarn for that.
Right.
A finer fiber. It's just not going to hold up as well, and it's just a waste. You're going to pay more for the finer fiber because it's rarer, and it's not going to be worth your time. But if you want something like, I'm trying to think, you know better than I do.
Yeah, like I don't recommend our fiber even for socks unless you're going to reinforce the heel and the toe.
No.
But something that you want to have some elasticity, anything you're going to wear around your neck, our fiber, right? The lower micron is better for.
Anything that touches the skin.
Yeah.
I mean, socks is a little bit different animal.
Camisoles, you wouldn't think that you can wear a lace weight wool camisole next to your skin, but absolutely. If your micron is low, that would be perfectly comfortable.
What about a bikini? Could you wear that? If you had a crocheted bikini, you might want to wear that with fine because it's going to be really scratchy if you don't do it. And it's not going to wear out anyway, right?
Get right on that. Okay. Okay, so there's a couple other values. one is SD and the other is CV, and they're kind of similar. So I'm going to ask about those two together. What do those mean when you look at those on the report?
I don't know. Yeah, so two different metrics. We said before AFD, or the average, is important, but that's not, I don't consider that to be the most important metric. SD is important because that's your measure of variability. So, as I said, you're taking thousands of readings. There's a variation within those readings. They're not all the same fiber diameter. And we go top to bottom of the fiber, they couldn't be the same. So that measure of variability is the standard deviation, or SD as they call it on the Micron report. Even though any statistician knows that S is actually standard deviation. I don't know why they put SD.
It's a lowercase cursive s, right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's what it is, and it's very important because that's going to tell you your width of your distribution. And I'll talk more about that as we get into the fiber samples. I picked a few sheep so we could compare and contrast. I'll talk more about how that's relevant. But obviously, the more consistent you have, the better, which means a lower standard deviation.
So if you're looking for a fleece and somebody in the merchant says it's got a micron of 19 and they don't give you any other information, you don't have the whole story. You really have to have every piece of data that's in that report to get a good understanding of what the fleece is going to be like. So what about CV? And I don't really get that one.
Yeah, CV is the coefficient of variation, and that's a normalization type thing that statisticians would use. So if I'm comparing, say, a Romney sheep with a Shetland, and they're going to be very different averages, right?
Right.
Off the top of my head, I don't know what a Romney would be, but
Low 30s.
yeah. But you want to look at the standard deviation and the average. So the CV allows you to compare animals, different breeds. If they're wool breeds, you might want to see that, because that's going to basically standardize. The CV is, in essence, just your standard deviation.
Okay, so like a standard deviation, you can't look at that alone
No.
because you have to have the AFD. So what the CV
Yeah,
does...
because the higher your AFD, the higher your standard deviation. That's just a
Right.
statistical law. That's
Okay. I think that makes sense now.
yeah. So if you took a bunch of weights and you had people that weighed 300 pounds, and then you had some that weighed 100 pounds, or even kids that are 50 pounds, that variety within each group is going to be.
And that standard deviation on its
gonna
own
be
doesn't
smaller.
mean anything
Yeah.
unless you comply. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So it's just that's a calculation, the CV, involving the standard deviation and the AFD.
So fleeces that have low SD and low CV are going to be more consistent.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to be, like, if you have a spinning method, you don't need to change the way you're doing it. It's going to be the same throughout the whole fleece.
I'm not a spinner, so I'm just telling you what the terms mean. So I will tell you, though, CV is a measure of consistency, because if I got a Romney and it's 35 microns, or I don't want to insult Romney people, but
No, that's
whatever
fine.
it would
That's
be. Mm-hmm. And then I'm thinking about a Shetland fleece that's 25, 26, something like that. I want to know how consistent each one is. So if you look at the CV, you can tell that.
Okay.
So if the Romney's 35, but the CV is like 30, then you know there's a lot of variability in the fiber, and that's going to affect the way you spin it and the outcome you're going to
And
get.
even what you might want to make with it, too.
Yeah,
All right.
for sure.
So, all right, what is the percent over 30 microns? Why is that important when you're considering a fleece? What is that going to tell you? Percent over 30 microns.
Yeah, I mean, 30 microns is the universal threshold for prickliness, as they say. You don't want a lot of fibers over 30. Now, every sample's, well, unless it's a lamb fleece or a merino or something like that, it's going to have some fibers in it that are over 30. But you want to minimize that. So if you look at your number greater than 30 and it's high, then that's going to be, it's kind of like mixing silk with steel wool. It's like even a little bit of steel wool in that silk sample is going to ruin the product. It's going to feel coarse.
If you want something
Although
fine,
if you want
yeah.
something more durable, you might intentionally do something like
Right.
that, right? So that's what that is. And it's, the comfort factor is, in fact, a calculation where you're taking what percentage of the fibers are below 30 microns.
That's what the comfort factor is? That's another value that's on that report?
Yeah.
CF, okay.
So you look for 100% if you can get it, but
If
it's
you're
rare.
looking for something next to skin.
For next to skin, you would want 100% or close to it. That means there's nothing at or above the prickly factor threshold of 30 microns.
So a fleece can have a low micron, a low average fiber diameter, and still be prickly, right? Because of what you were just talking about.
It could be, and it's best, and I'll go through that when we get into the distributions on a few sheep where I can show you that. And that comes down to the standard deviation. If you look at the normal distribution, some fibers are going to be high, some are low, and then you got the average. If you get the average too high to 30, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. The AFD is close to 30, half your samples are going to be above 30, and that's, again, might be what you want for some products.
So you probably know this if you're a subscriber to my channel, but we are breeding for, and we were selecting for sheep that had the lower numbers, and so we have this bias, and it kind of creeps in here when we're talking about stuff, because in our minds, we're filtering for stuff that's, as Rich is describing, doesn't have a big percent over 30% or 30 microns and all that other stuff, right?
But that's only because we're breeding for the finer end of the spectrum.
Right. That's our bias.
That's just where we settled after years of doing just about all kinds of wool, always Shetland wool, but at the full spectrum. That's really the sweet spot that we ended up with that we like. And then it doesn't mean that another breeder doesn't like that and they do something different. But that's what we do.
So what's the info that you would use if you wanted to compare? Like, let's just say you're looking at my auction and you want to, you're comparing one sheep's fleece to another sheep's fleece. What value allows you to make comparisons, or what values, I guess I should say, in our flock? So not like, we're not trying to compare a Romney with a fine Shetland.
Yeah, so just sticking with our flock.
Which would you look at to get the best idea of, what the differences are, or whatever? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I would look at everything on there. I mean, there isn't a stat on the report except for length that I would not look at. Length is on there. It'll tell you the staple length, but they measure it just the freestanding. It doesn't tell you anything about the elasticity. So ideally, if it was me, I would do the freestanding and then I would do the fully stretched. Mm-hmm. And then there would be some measure of elasticity as a percentage or something.
Yeah, we don't really know how they measure the staple lengths.
They do. They just They just set it down with a ruler, and that's how they measure it. Yeah, I've asked them about that. I've talked to them on the phone about that.
Oh, okay.
I don't put a lot of faith in it. Also, you're not cutting it. You could cut it right off at the skin to get the full length. A lot of times you're using scissors or clippers and you don't even get right down there, so it's not quite as long as it really is on the sheep, if that makes sense. Because every time I look at the sheep, the fleece looks longer than when I look at the samples.
I know it. Well, we rue all our samples too, so they don't go right down to the skin when you're pulling
because, depending on the time of year, right?
All right, so Micron data is one piece of data we can use to figure out what a fleece is going to be like. And I'm talking about when you're buying online, because most of the people that are buying fleeces in this auction are not local. So they have to just look at data. So the Micron tells you stuff, but like what else?
Well, first of all,
the average fiber diameter, I mean, like what else in the report and what other data can you use to compare?
Well, first of all, buying a fleece that way,
it's hard.
Is like buying a car by looking at the gas mileage and some of the technical features on the brochure. It's like, it's how many times have you done that where you like a car, you spec'd everything out, researched it, did your spreadsheet, then you go drive it and you're like, oh yeah, I don't like this. That's how it is. But if you want to try and boil things down to some metrics, so compare fleeces, and maybe you have some experience with our flock, that helps too, because if you have not seen the fine fleece, you may hate it, you might really like it, but if you've seen it before, you know what you're getting. So, it's hard for me because I don't believe in single metric evaluations, but we always publish the SF, the spinning fineness. Right? And that's one metric that can include everything we've talked about, the average, the SD, the CV, It's all in one calculation. And the reason I think that's valuable is because the spinning fineness, or SF, should always be lower than your AFD for next to skin type applications, because that tells you that it's consistent and that the average isn't like just a fluke and there's a lot of heavy fibers in there. So you know that what you're getting.
Well, let's look at English Gardens. You've got her there, right? And
yeah.
She's probably the coarsest ewe in our flock. So what is her SF compared to her?
Her SF is 30.5 microns. Her AFD is 30.3. So that's a pretty good example where, and I know just from looking at those two numbers, they're almost the same, that the CV is going to be around 24%. 24% is the threshold where if your CV is 24%, your AFD and SF will be exactly the same.
Huh.
If your CV is lower than 24, which is what we always shoot for, then your SF is going to be lower than your AFD. So I look at those things.
But she's the coarsest one in our flock. So I mean, all of our fleeces.
Well, she's also 14.
Right. But I guess we're talking about, like, if you're looking at other farms and you want something that's next to skin soft, that's a really good rule of thumb. All of our stuff is going to be like that, though, so don't spend time trying to figure that out, right? Your spinning fineness with our fleeces is always going to be lower number than our AFD. I
would say yes. That's what we target. And I don't know of any. She's close. And I know
that's what I'm saying. She's like my coarsest one.
Well, there's another one that's not as coarse, but her AFD and SF are the same. I think it's Audi, but we'll get to that.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
So those are questions to ask. You want to look at those things.
Okay.
If you're looking for next to skin quality, you want a good spinning experience, then you certainly want to look at the average and the SF and compare them. And the SF ideally will be significantly lower. And the SF is supposed to be, it was intended to be kind of a measure of what it actually feels like. Because the average itself is just a number. It doesn't harness variability or anything like that. But the SF is supposed to be, this is what it actually feels like. So it could be higher than the average, could be lower, but it's supposed to be the way it handles. It's kind of a measure of handle in a sense.
Oh, okay, good. So Crimp is another one. Can you get a sense of Crimp by looking at the data? Where would you find that?
Yeah, there's something called the CRV. It's a measure of curvature. And it's just a measure of how organized and how tightly crimped your fleece is. So with the CRV, you want to get, I like over 100. Because most of ours are over 100. As they get older, it gets wider apart, and that number goes down. But it's also tied to elasticity, right? A higher CRV, more crimp per inch, you're going to get a stretchier yarn, more elastic yarn.
All right, I can edit this out because this is a trick question, but.
See, I knew you would do it.
I know it. So when I'm doing videos and I'm parting fleeces, there's going to be times where I'm going to reflect and I'm going to say, oh, that looks like a boulder crimp. Now, in our flock, do you know what the CRV would be if it looks like I think one of the AIUs has this. It just looks like a boulder crimp.
Do you know which one?
I don't, not off the top of my head. But do you know what that number would be if, based on our standard, just our visual standard? What would you guess? Like if it was bold enough that I looked at it and was like, yeah, that's kind of a bold crimp.
I would say between 50 and 70.
Okay.
70 is not bad at all.
Well, bold isn't bad either.
70 is going to have some elasticity, but if it's really bold and it's more of a wavy crimp, that's not going to have any elasticity. Mm-hmm. So like English Gardens, her CRV is 53 and a half. I don't, off the top of my head, even know what her crimp looks like, but it's probably not much.
It's not. It's more wavy.
Yeah, so that's what you're going to get in the mid 50s, something like that.
Okay.
And then Blackburn is like 75 for her CRV. One of the AIUs that Jen just mentioned.
Yeah, one of the white ones.
She's probably a boulder crimp, looking at that number.
She's got a nice fleece.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. There is a white one that's got a boulder crimp. I don't know which one that is.
I'll look into it. I'll put it up here as a picture. Okay, so here's another question. So let's just say you're a repeat Whispering Pines Farm fleece purchaser. and you have a ewe you're in love with and you want to buy her fleece next year, do you see changes in fleeces year over year, particularly with their Micron data?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a big nutritional aspect to this. Sometimes I can. I can't look at, say in January, kind of predict what the fleeces are going to look like without looking at them. I mean, because it depends on the growing year. From like May and through November when they're on pasture, or in the winter or in the spring, we're giving them grain and hay. They're not on pasture, but they're on grain and hay. Grain will significantly impact and negatively impact the micron. It'll get bigger. So depending on the growing year, and I think we saw it in some ewes, and it varies. I've looked at this like 3 years. I did a study. Some ewes didn't change at all, and then in those same years, other ones ballooned wildly. They really grew micron.
Yep.
So it's somewhat genetically related.
We've looked at ewes over the years. Like there's like Fanny, for example. I don't know how old she is, 9. And if you look at her spinning fineness, the specific metric, year over year, and she has not increased. And there's been years where she went down but then came back up to somewhere around 21. Even this last report, I think she was hovering around 21.
We've targeted that over the years. We said that we want to keep ewes and breed with ewes that are consistent from year to year and almost robust against the nutritional effect from seasonal spikes in protein. A really good growing year is going to cause it to go up versus if you have a year. And last year, I want to say, I'm not sure about this. We usually take them off. What?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was going to say numbers went down last year, not to.
Well, usually we take them off pasture like now for a month or two, give them hay, and then we'll put them back on in the fall in September. Last year, we didn't take them off for very long from what I remember. Right. And some of the numbers are higher this year, I've noticed.
But that's because we had the new pasture. We didn't need to take them off and give them hay.
Yeah. So
this year the numbers are a little higher, right?
Yeah. So I think the long and the short answer is don't assume because you saw, Blackburn from last year that her numbers this year are the same, especially because Blackburn was a yearling last year.
And she had a lamb too.
Yeah. So it varies from year to year, and it's good to ask what the current result, what Micron results are from the last fleece or the fleece that you want to buy.
Right.
Always ask that anyway. You should always do that.
You should. So like, for example, if you're working on a project and you used Blackburn last year and maybe you need to finish a sleeve and you think you're going to buy her fleece from this year and it'll match, it's possible it won't. Colors can even change a little bit year over year. So the best rule of thumb, if you're in a situation like that where you want to make a sweater, buy a couple and blend them.
It seems like the colors get lighter as they age.
Yep.
No matter whether it's gray, black, black should be, sometimes black will develop some graying or white fibers, but that's when they get really old. But grays and dark chocolates lighten up over time, they just do. One fleece is lighter than another.
All right, so this one I think we touched on a little bit, but if I love lustrous or bouncy fleeces, is there anything in the Micron report that predicts that?
Yeah, so a bouncy fleece would be an elastic fleece. So when you spin up the yarn, it's got bounce, it stretches. And that would be your CRV, which measures the crimp. So that's the best way to determine, I really want a really elastic yarn. Go for the highest CRV you can find, which would be over 100, and you're going to be surprised at how elastic that is. Yeah. It's almost like you spun elastic into it. That's so springy or bouncy.
I think luster. I try to do
luster is
photos.
Not in the report.
I try to show you the close-up so you can see. Lighting is going to vary there, but
luster is strictly a measure of the scales that are on the fleece, on the fiber, and in the way it reflects light. So if it's a shiny fleece and you can see the reflection, it's going to look silky and it'll feel silky. That means it has low fibers or low scales. Not low fibers. And even a fine fleece that has heavy scales will feel. It's not lustrous. It'll look matted. Matted in the sense of the color, not that's matted. And it'll feel coarser, and you'd be like, oh, this doesn't feel that fine because it has heavy scales. Not usually, I haven't noticed that with our sheep. that they're fine and they have scales that are noticeable, but it does happen with the breed for sure.
And we don't know of any tests we can submit our stuff to for scale data, right? I mean,
you could certainly look at them under a heavy magnification. You could see the scales, but it's hard to compare one fleece to another using that method. I don't think it would be very consistent.
All right, so you pulled some of the cards. So I make up cards for us to use throughout the year, which have all the fleece information on one side and then the micron data on the other. And Rich looked at the micron report and then pulled out 4 cards from 4 different sheep in our flock that stood out that he thought were interesting. So let's hear.
So the first one is Barbarina. She's a fawn cat mugget, and her average, and she's 3 years old, which I thought was interesting. Her average, her AFD, is 20.7 microns, which for a 3-year-old,
that's what we want.
I mean, in the Shetland world, that's a really good average. Standard deviation 3.9, which hopefully by now you realize I could throw out any number here for the standard deviation, and it doesn't mean anything until you have the average. So when I see 3.9, I can now look at the CV, and I can calculate that. I don't have to calculate, it's on the report, and it's 18.7%. So we're looking for anything less than 20%. I like as low as we can get, but that's not the most important metric. It's just, I think there's a correlation between CV and the spinning niceness. Mm-hmm. Should come up with a word for that.
Consistency, I think.
Yeah, so her CEM is 7.2, and we haven't talked about that.
What's that?
CEM is a coarse edge mean, and that's the average of your highest 5% of your fibers in terms of fiber diameter. So why would you care about that? Well, if you got a high CEM, let's just say you've got a CEM of 15, that means you got a subset of your population, of your sample, that is 15 microns higher than your average. So you see, oh, my average is 25, that's good. And then you look at the CEM and it's like 30 or something like that, or 15, what did I say, 15? Mm-hmm. Which I've seen a lot of them higher than that, Shetland fleeces. So 15 microns, you add that on to 30, what did I say, 25? Mm-hmm. So that's 40, right?
So 20 was the AFD, and 15 was the coarse edge mean.
Yeah.
So what that means is you could have fibers up in 35, you could have a 35 micron fiber in there. Is that what that means?
Well, it means the average of your highest, your 5%, I'm not going to say that's right.
The top 5%.
They take the highest 5% of your coarsest fibers, and they take an average, and then they compare that to your overall average. So if your overall average is 25, and the average of your coarsest, well, when the CEM says 15, you add the 15 to the 25, and that gives you, that average is actually 40 microns. So you've got a big population up around 40 microns and everywhere in between there.
Oh, okay.
So I don't pay a lot of attention to that metric because I can find out that information by looking at the distribution, and I can look at some of the other numbers and I'll know, without looking at that. I mean, I can almost tell just by looking at the fleece and looking at the other numbers, because really CEM is a measure of double coatedness. So that's why you have another population, because you got coarse fibers, you got fine fibers, and that's because there's a double coated fleece. So the double coated fleece will always have a CEM greater than 10.
And that's like an Icelandic fleece where you've got that long hairy tip and then like a real dense fluffy.
Well, Shetland too.
Shetlands have it as well, yeah.
So for that reason, if you don't want double coated, then you could look at that and it'll tell you. And if you did want it, which you might, then you'll know too also that if you're getting a CEM of 7.2 like Barbarina has, you may not want that because it's really consistent, very
single coated is what they call it,
single coated,
right?
yeah. And her SF, which I mentioned before, 19.7, which is a full micron less than her AFD. So I like her fiber length too.
She's got a good staple length for that low of a micron. Normally when our lower micron use, their staple length is 2 inches or whatever. But that's a really nice...
But if you look at, yeah, we'll put this up on the video, but if you look at her fiber diameter, you look at the distribution, it's tall and narrow, which is what you want. You don't want a lot of width between, so you got your average, and you can see the big spike in the middle on your bell curve. And then you got a distribution where half of them are lower than that, half are higher. You want that narrow so you don't have a lot of heavier fibers, high fibers. So you can look at that and you can see that. Now her CRV is 85, and I would have thought it was higher than that, just looking at it, but she's 3. I don't know how common it is for us to have. We'll find one that has a higher CRV at a higher age with that really fine crimp, but that's a pretty good number for the age, and we'll see if we've got better. But yeah, that's what stands out to me. Her comfort factor, by the way, is 98.7, which I talked about comfort factor, but it's really what percentage of the fibers are less than that prickle factor of 30 microns. Hers are 98.7% of the fibers are less than 30 microns. So that to me is pretty significant. So that's Barberina.
Can I see that?
Audi is older. She's 7 years old. She's black. Her AFD is 24.4. And I picked her because if you look at the fiber, it's different than the other ones. It's more blocky. It feels fine. It's 24.4. That's pretty fine. Crimp-wise, the CRV is 89.9, which is a little higher than Barberina's was, which, again, I'm a little surprised by that. I mean, if you hold it up to a light, maybe you could probably see that, but I'm just looking at it on the card, and I can't really see that. So they're similar, though, the CRVs, which is the crimp. CV is 23.9. So that's higher than what we normally have, and that's because the standard deviation is 5.8. This is a genetic thing. This has nothing to do with nutrition.
Color? Doesn't have anything to do with color?
You know, for a while it was really hard to find fine black Shetlands and fine white Shetlands. So I don't know. I think it's just genetics. I don't think it's the color at all, because we have fine both black and white. CEM is 10.9, which that line tended to be a little more double coated than what we're used to. And comfort factor 85%, which again for a 7-year-old you wouldn't expect it to be really low. That's not too bad.
I've never considered Audi to be one of our really fine ewes, but I like her fleece because do the numbers reflect that it would be a consistent fleece?
The SF is 24.4, which is the same as the AFD. It's another one that's exactly the same.
Okay.
So when I'm looking at it, I would say it's not really what I would prefer, just looking at the numbers. The fleece itself looks nice, but looking at her distribution, it's shorter and wider than Barberina's was, so less consistent. And like I said, her CEM was 10.9. So if you add 10.9 to her average, that gives you up to 34, 35.3. Still not too bad. But that's how that works. And you look at the distribution, you can see it. So
I love her. Let me see that.
Now Blackburn.
Look, Audi's got a little bit of gray in there because she's so old.
Yeah, so Blackburn is an interesting one. She's one of our AI ewes. We did AI on 8 ewes that one year, and only we had lambs out of 3 of them, right? 3 ewes.
Yes.
Blackburn is out of local, I believe,
yes.
Right? So her AFD is 26.7. Her standard deviation is 5.8, just like the last one was. And because her AFD is higher than Audi's, her CV is 21.9. So it's a little bit. I consider that a little bit better than what Audi's was. CEM 10, which is in my experience is right on the border between double and single coated. So you can look at it as a continuum. You know, they used to call this an intermediate fleece back in the day. It's not truly double coated. You wouldn't look at it and separate the the fine and the coarse fibers because they're very similar. Comfort factor 85%, SF at 26.2, which is half a micron lower than the AFD, so that's what we want to see. Her CRV is 73.7, which again, if you look at this, it looks very crimpy, finely crimped. Not the bold crimp that we saw in some of the other ones. And Jen will put that in the video so you can see what a boldly crimped or wavy fleece would be. And then we can see what that CRV
I think that'd be
is.
a really good video to do at some point, is to go through the AI fleeces, because we spent a lot of time and had a lot of mind share working on that whole project. And I think there's a lot of things to say about that might make up a nice video.
Yeah, so I look at Blackburn's fleece, and just looking at it on the card, I wouldn't believe that's 26.7. It looks like 22, 23. It looks really fine, and it's really bouncy, really elastic. And to me, and then they're dense and long too. I think her fleeces...
Those AI fleeces are very dense.
Yeah,
yes.
which is one of the things we were looking for, is improved density and length. So we ended up giving up a little bit in fineness by doing that. But boy, in terms of usability, and this is going to be a nice fleece to spin with, even if it's not as fine as some of the other use that we've talked about.
Doesn't that go to that whole thing about, you were talking about buying a vehicle based on just the mileage, right? I mean, the Micron is one thing, but I mean, I see you over there just handling that fleece.
Well, this was the most elastic one that we had here tonight. So,
what's the other one you got there? You got one more?
well, I had English Garden, but we already talked about her.
Let's talk about her a little more.
Her fleece is not that elastic. It does have elasticity, though. It's not like some that you look at.
I always describe her as a fine Romney.
Yeah. The reason she's in the flock, first of all, she's an F2, which means she's a second generation. When the first time we did AI, her mother was an F1, which is a lamb that was AI'd, the result of an AI. So she always had a really nice conformation, which is what I was going for with that breeding. Actually, her mother wasn't AI. Her mother was Audi's mom, which is Itasca. Her father was AI. He was out of, oh my gosh.
Persia? Cordonui?
Yeah, he was out of Persia, and who was the ram?
Little Buckaroo?
Yeah, who was the ram that he's out, the AI, UK ram that we AI'd? It'll come to me.
Jacob? Oh, that's the ones we just did. I don't know.
Not Grayling. It was another gray cat mugget. And it wasn't Heights Orion, who's not a cat mugget. It's the other one. Anyway, we'll think and we'll put it up on the screen.
Yeah.
It'll come to me. Anyway, she always had, it's funny, we sold her and then we bought her back. And the reason we sold her is because she was coarser than things we had in our flock. And every time we have lambs, we have to sell adults to make room for them because we were limited to how much space we have. So she didn't make the cut one year. But she always had a really fine crimp in the front half, and she fell off in the back. And so at one point she was finer than she is now. In fact, I think last year she was quite fine. That's just how year to year it varies. So we didn't buy her back just because she had a fine fleece. We thought we could do something whether breeding-wise, which we did. We had some good offspring from her. And as I recall, I think John Snow was out of her, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And we used him a lot. We really liked him. He was really fine. So, that, you know, you never know how things are going to work out when you have a breeding program. But those are kind of the things we think about when we're putting sheep together and hoping for an offspring that's better than either parent, really. Or at least improving on one of them, or both, or whatever.
All right, so hopefully this helps you understand how to use that Micron report. You know, you might in the past have kind of just breezed through and not really looked at it because, you know, you didn't understand it. Hopefully this gives you a little better understanding of the information. So I have almost all the fleeces listed up on the site now for you to go through and review, and you can look at all the data by the time this video airs, they should all be up there and available for you to view. So the auction starts July 27th at 6 p.m. That's a Sunday, and 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And then it'll conclude the following Sunday, which is August 3rd at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you have any questions, feel free to, drop them in the comments. Also, I'd like to know, do you like this format? Would you like to see more videos of just me and Rich talking about a topic? Love to know, what you think.
Or would you like to see less videos of us doing that?
Or less, yeah, exactly. Yes, thank you so much for stopping by to watch the video, and I hope you can come back soon.
Cheers.